Hello and welcome to TIP International Radio. I'm your host, Leah Masten. We are showcasing prestigious top professionals from all industries all over the globe to share their experience and stories of success. Joining us today from Toronto, Canada is an incredible, brilliant humanitarian, professor, top health advocate, and health educator. He has been honored on an international level by many organizations. He was just recently selected by the International Association of Top Professionals, IAOTP, as Professor of the Decade, Hero in Higher Education, Visionary of the Year, Humanitarian of the Year, Intellectual of the Year, just to name a few. He has over 2 decades of professional experience in higher education and has taught 45 different subjects at college and university. He is Associate Adjunct Professor at Renison University College, University of Waterloo, and Professor at Guelph Humber. Please welcome to the show, everyone, Dr. Daniel Andreae. Hi, Dr. Andreae. Thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, Leah, to be here with you, and I'm so looking forward to speaking with you about many important issues.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. Dr. Dan, you have devoted a significant part of your life and career researching those affected by neurodegenerative diseases. Tell us what got you interested in this field.
Well, Leah, certainly the brain is a fascinating subject. And there are really two areas that we need to further explore. One is outer space, and we're doing that now. There are vehicles on Mars right now exploring. The other is inner space, and that's to do with the brain. When you think about it, you have this 3-pound organ that you can cup into your hands, and it is responsible ultimately as the command center for everything we do, everything we think and feel and fantasize about. When we move, it all gets processed through the brain. The brain, and it's amazing to say this, but every second the brain makes 10 to the 16 number of connections. Now that's a 1 with 16 zeros after it, and that's among 100 billion different neurons that represent the number of stars in the Milky Way. As you and I are talking, already there have been billions and billions of connections. We are learning much more about the brain. Now we know a lot, but we know there's much, much more to learn. We really are in the infancy of discovering how the mysteries of the brain really work. And so when it comes to neurodegenerative diseases, this can be anything from Alzheimer's to Parkinson's, Tourette's syndrome, even autism. And I became involved with the brain because I had the privilege of serving as the first executive director of the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto, which was the first society formed anywhere in the world. And I actually, just as an anecdote here, I was heading up a small health education agency, and we started something called the National Eating Disorder Information Center at Toronto Hospital. It's still in operation. It supplies the only talk line or help line across the country for people suffering from disordered eating. But one thing we did as well is we put on conversational evenings in the community at the main reference library here in Toronto. And that could have been around summer safety or how to eat better, whatever it might be. And a friend of mine said, why don't you do it on Alzheimer's disease? And at that stage I was young and it hadn't really permeated the consciousness of our society. So I said, what's Alzheimer's? But I thought, that's interesting. It's to do with the brain, and I was interested in the brain. So I got on the phone and I said to that agency, can I speak to your director? And they said, well, we're looking for a director. We don't have one. And I thought, really? Okay. So long story short, I applied and I became that director, which only further fortified my interest in the brain. This was an organization, Leah, at the time that was really volunteer run, and they wanted to carry it to the next level. And so we ended up, and I had the privilege of working with really dedicated volunteers to set up a counseling program, a resource center, a wandering patient registry, which is used around the country today. We set up support groups, supported research, and really took it to the next level, in my mind, really enhancing the profile of it. So throughout this process, I really learned much more about the brain, and it really further whetted my appetite.
Well, your journey into the field is incredible. Some of your many areas of expertise include your integrative approach to health, particularly how stress can affect the brain. Tell us more about that and how to cope with stress. And I'm guessing this is a really huge topic for people considering, with the pandemic and everything, how they've been affected. And I'm sure you have some great tips.
Oh, absolutely. It's been an unprecedented and a really frustrating and awful year in so many ways, year and a half almost.
Yeah.
And in terms of stress and tying that in, first of all, we have to recognize everybody suffers from stress. It is inevitable. And so it's a question of how we learn to cope with the stress. And there are various techniques for doing that. Now, stress actually is a good thing. If you win the lottery or you form a new relationship or you're going on a vacation, your body reacts excitedly. And in fact, the same circuits are used in pleasurable stress called eustress as they are in distress as well. And so the fact is that stress is a lifesaver too. If you and I, Leah, are crossing a street and a big car comes whipping by us, we jump back, our heart rate beats quickly, we breathe in a panicked way, in a sense. What happens then is that our system eventually goes back to an equilibrium, meaning a basis. We eventually say, oh my gosh, that was scary, but I'm now back to normal, so to speak. And we want to get back to that base level, okay, to be ready for the very next challenge that we have. Now, stress immediately, called acute stress, like the example I just gave you, is again absolutely necessary for our survival. And in fact, when we are stressed very, very quickly in that sense, actually our perceptions become more clear and focused, our immune system actually increases and our performance level can actually improve. Think of tennis players or other athletes that when they're in that situation, they rise to the occasion. Where stress is a problem is when it's not resolved at the source. And then, Leah, what happens is chronic stresses can develop. It's a bit like a steam kettle that can't let off steam. And then, of course, at that point, you can develop certain symptoms, which are red flags to problems that may eventually develop into more serious problems. So you have psychological issues, so anxiety, depression, impatience, moodiness. You have physical symptoms. They can be higher cholesterol, for example, or psoriasis, or they can be depression as well, which has physical implications in the brain. Behavioral symptoms as well, social withdrawal, again, irritability, taking risks that really put you in a difficult position. So not dealing with stress and nipping it in the bud, it can eventually perhaps lead to burnout. And that's a much more difficult situation to resolve. Now, having said that, the key is that everybody is different. What we get stressed by depends on our own perception of things. What might stress you, Leah, may not stress me, or vice versa. And so we have to be aware of our own triggers. And so when we get triggered, we react stressfully. But what gets us down to a calmer state? Well, that depends on what techniques we use. Deep breathing is a wonderful one. Also, going out for a walk in nature, talking to a friend is a wonderful one. Reading a book, for example. And so we need to build these techniques into our daily practice and therefore realize that it's all about how we perceive things and the action we take. An example very quickly here would be you have identical twins, okay? And they're on a beach and they're in Spain and the waves are coming up and it knocks both kids over. They're identical, so they have exactly the same genetics. And so one runs into the ocean and loves it, okay? They want more excitement. The other one goes crying back to mother. Same genetics, same stimulus, the wave, two totally different reactions. And that's going to depend on things like one's genetics, one's upbringing, one's belief system. And so we interpret things differently. Nobody's the same, and no one technique necessarily works for everyone. But accept the stress, accept it as being a reality of life, and learn to allow it and accept it, and then work on controlling it. And you'll be better for it.
That's just some great tips. Tell us about the Education Academy and your involvement with the Weizmann Institute of Science and the Neuroscience Lab that was named in your honor.
Oh, thanks, Leah. I love the Weizmann Institute. It's actually in Rehovot, Israel, and it is one of the world's leading research and education institutes. I'll tell people about the Weizmann. They may not have heard of it, although I wish they had. Every time, okay, that we pull out our ATM or debit card, put it in that machine to pull out money. We can thank the Weizmann Institute because they invented the encryption code for this. 2/3 of all the MS, multiple sclerosis drugs, have been invented by the Weizmann. And Weizmann has, by the way, true story, has more applied patents, okay, for products and drugs, etc., than all the Ivy League schools combined, which really blows people's minds, but it really is a world-leading center in that regard. I got involved with them, knew about them through the Alzheimer's Society, and I love the idea of an international emphasis and exposure. And so I have supported a neuroscience laboratory there under distinguished scientist Dr. Ivo Spiegel. And what he's looking at is the connection between nature and nurture. What that means is our own biology and the environment out there and how these impact on each other. It's not one or the other. It's always a connection between the two. And so most studies in neuroscience in the brain are looking at the brain out. He's looking at out in and how the environment can actually change the wiring of the brain or the connections or what are called synapses between the neurons, how there are levers that can be turned on and off, which happen by way of the environment. You know, there's something, without getting too technical about it, Leah, called epigenetics. And that's the fact that our genes in our brains and in our bodies can be turned on and off depending on the environmental triggers. It doesn't change the sequence of the DNA or of our genetic material, but it's like a piano. You push down one key and then another. It can do that, and that can influence our behavior too. So I've always been a big believer, Leah, in mind, body, and nature, nurture, and the combination and integrative medicine. Because certainly in medicine and health, we begin with biology, physiology. How does the body work? But that alone, although necessary, is not sufficient. We also have to understand our psychology, our emotions, how we see things, and even as well, what are called in fancy terms, social determinants of health, which means that it's not just a question of diet, exercise, stress management, and sleep, which is very, very important, but where do you live? Is it a safe area? Are you employed? Do you have a health condition? What's going on in your neighborhood? Do you have an educational level that allows you to navigate the society? Do you have an access to services? All of these things go into the whole picture of integrative health. And so sometimes symptoms that we have can be dealt with fairly straightforwardly, but more often than not, it's a combination of many other factors. And we try to look for what are called the upstream causes for the downstream symptoms, so to speak. So it's a really holistic approach that we really have to take, because that is where real health or optimal health can be achieved.
We're not complex or anything, are we?
Oh God, we are incredibly complex. Everything in our body interacts with everything else. So our
Right.
brains interact with our hearts. You know, we have more connections from the heart to the brain than the brain to the heart.
Mhm.
Our bodies, in terms of our stomachs and our intestines, I'll tell you, 90% up to 90%, certainly 80% of our immune system is in our gut, not in our brains, for example. So whether it's our hormonal system or it's our nervous system, it's our cardiac system, our nervous system, they're all constantly in a symphony working together every single second.
Incredible. Among the numerous awards that you've won, you were recently just selected as Top Health Advocate and Educator of the Year by IAOTP. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Tell us about the advocacy and health with the different organizations that you do.
Sure. First of all, I want to give a shout out to IAOTP because it is the gold standard of membership organizations. It's run by an energetic and dynamic Stephanie Cerami, her husband Chris, her mother Emma as well. And what they do is they provide a space and a forum to bring together the brightest minds in the world around so many different subjects. It's a chance to network, to learn new ideas from other people, to form bonds that way, and they're wonderful at recognizing people's outstanding accomplishments. So I think it would be so important for people to understand and know the tremendous contribution that IAOTP makes to advancing humanity, so to speak. In terms of the organizations, I'm involved in several of them. And in terms of looking at health and medicine, obviously medicine is wonderful. It's created so many advantages for us. It's extended our life expectancy. We have to go to the doctor occasionally. Drugs and surgery are needed in certain circumstances. and that is fine. But there's another wing of the plane, so to speak. If surgery and drugs and medicine is one wing, the other wing has to do with people and their feelings, their emotions, feeling connected and supported. And again, it's all part of the package. So when I support an organization like NEDIC, which is the National Eating Disorder Information Center, I'm doing it because there's a need for it. People need to feel empowered. They need to have knowledge. And above all, they need to feel hope. And so if they can connect up in a way that will enhance or bolster the situation so they can get better more quickly, or at least have a pathway forward, that's wonderful. I'm the patron of Brain Injury Canada, and of course, brain injuries are often underreported. There are many more of them than we realize, but at the same time, people don't know where to go. They feel despair. They need to have hope. They need to understand what's happening and to be linked up to appropriate resources. That's another example. At the Alzheimer's Society, I was chair of their Patrons Council, and this group is one that is there to open doors and to raise funds for the cause, whether it be research or care programs. You know, when it comes to Alzheimer's, for example, there are many of these conditions. Certainly the patient suffers, and it's something that needs to be addressed, and it's very difficult. But it's the caregivers and the families that get stressed out so much, and they need help too as well. So many people have said that having the society there and support groups has been an invaluable way to keep them on track and keep them working toward a solution. So that's another one. I'm also involved with the University Health Network, and there I support several organizations within the University Health Network. I sit on the Board of Governors of the Michener Institute, which is the educational wing of the what's called the UHN, the University Health Network. And in fact, the UHN was named as the fourth best hospital in the world. So it's an incredible organization. But again, my focus is often on education. How can we give people more information? How can we link them up to services? How can we offer them support? And that is really important to meet the psychological and emotional needs of a health condition.
Well, you are such an amazing professional who is always giving back to your community and empowering others with your generosity. You were the first executive director of the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto, which you received the Lifetime Achievement Award, and were previously awarded by the International Society by their chair, Princess Yasmin Khan.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
Incredible. You are the chair of the Patrons Council of the Society, honorary patron of Brain Injury Canada, chair of the Advisory Council of the National Eating Disorder Centre at Toronto General Hospital, in addition to being the longest serving president of the social work profession in Ontario and
Yes.
board member of the Psychology Foundation of Canada. You're also sponsoring philanthropically advanced in robotic surgery.
Yes.
Tell us about this and why it is so important for you to be active with these organizations and to pay it forward with the community.
One thing I love to do, Leah, is to support organizations and causes and initiatives that will launch a project, for example. Supporting things that had I not stepped in, they may not happen or happen as quickly as I would like to see. An example was supporting something called the Da Vinci robot at the UHN, at the Princess Margaret Hospital, but also used by many other departments there as well. And this robot is amazing. It allows surgeons to do remote surgery and also to do it in a much quicker way, with fewer incisions, less blood loss, less recidivism, meaning people returning to hospital, quicker recovery times. And again, it meets the humane aspect of care, which is so very important. We know from research studies that if people receive the emotional support, let's say in hospital, post operation, it shows that people recover more quickly and more efficiently and effectively if they're given that kind of emotional support. Doesn't mean they won't get better, but it enhances, because again, we are mind body in that sense. So I love to do that. I've done it in that case. I've done it as well with my sister, with a world famous surgeon, and he's a stroke surgeon who's developed brand new ways of intervening quickly in surgery. If you get to him and you've had a stroke, and he talked about a 94-year-old lady who actually was at a dance, and she had a stroke. They got her in very quickly into the hospital in downtown Toronto. He was able, with his new equipment, to blast that stroke out, that clot out, and she went home later that night. Just unbelievable what we can achieve in medicine in so many ways. So if it's that kind of thing, I'm interested in doing it. I also love to support students, because education, as I point out, is one of my major emphases and interests. And I support student scholarships at Humber College, or the Humber Institute of Advanced Learning, and just had a recent ceremony with them. And for these kids who've struggled in life, and especially during COVID, to be recognized is really like a Nobel Prize for them. And so whatever I can do to enhance people's chances, give them a leg up, I like to do. Another favorite project for me is one that involves Laurentian University in Northern Ontario. And for the past several years, I have sponsored what's called the Town to Gown evening up there in the middle of winter. So it's freezing cold up there. But they will get, it's open to the public, up to 900 people come in to hear a lecturer speak about a topic of interest to them. And so again, getting information out is so important. We've had Stephen Page of Bare Naked Ladies, for example. If anybody's a music fan, he came up, played the guitar, and it was wonderful. We've had Theo Fleury, a well-known NHL hockey player, if people follow hockey, and he's had his own struggles, and he shares them openly. You would hear a pin drop as he talked about it. James Orbinski, who received the Nobel Prize, or Doctors Without Borders. The topics are all diverse, and Olympic skaters and skiers have come into. The idea is to promote living in a healthy community. And again, it goes back to my philosophy, Leah, of really looking at the entire picture of healthcare, not just the medical or physiological, but the psychological and the social. It's so important. We know, and I had a chance to study at the Benson Henry Mind Body Institute in Boston, affiliated with Harvard, and it was a course, and we found out some very interesting things, that in terms of longevity, there are two things that stand out. And again, people may disagree with some of these, but it was a fascinating study. It showed that having control of your life, doing what you want within the limits of the fact that we don't have total control, but if we feel in control. And the second area, which was absolutely crucial, is social support. They've done experiments, and I've taught this in class, where if you're being hugged by somebody, and somebody you want to be hugged by, and they actually go in and they withdraw blood from you, that the immune system will actually increase in terms of protecting you. So again, that connection between mind and body is undeniable in my mind.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun to know. Yeah.
Throughout your illustrious career, you have won numerous awards and have been recognized on an international level. This year alone, selected as Top Health Advocate and Health Educator of the Decade, International Hero in Higher Education, Humanitarian of the Year. You will have a chapter dedicated to you in IAOTP's Top 50 Fearless Leader publications. You graced the front cover of Tip magazine, appeared on the famous Reuters building in Times Square, have been honored at IAOTP's annual awards galas as Professor of the Decade, Male Visionary of the Year, Man of the Year, were named Intellectual of the Year, and this is just naming a few. What would you say has been the highlight of your career or the most memorable experience that you've had to date?
Well, backing up a second, Leah, you asked about being the health advocate and educator of the decade. And again, I'm honored by that. And it really goes back to my philosophy of wanting to make things understandable for people so they can use them in a very practical way. When I was teaching, they called me a practical academic, because I like things that have a tangible outcome that will actually help people in any way possible that way. You asked me what's the biggest highlight. Well, there are several of them, but if I was to think about it, in many ways, it's being able to have helped the students, to mentor the students. You're not going to reach everybody. And my philosophy when I teach is that the head meets the heart. When somebody can actually see something and how it's practical for them, they can relate to it, it's so much more effective. When I see a student in front of me, I don't just see somebody from the head up, from the Adam's apple up. Knowledge is important, but I see them as a person, somebody with fears and doubts and dreams and aspirations. And so to make things real for them and recognize them, that you're developing not just expertise in a subject with them, but also you're developing a person. And to create, above all, whether it's healthcare or whether it's education, to create a safe atmosphere. That is so, so important, because I found that when people feel they're in a comfortable surrounding, that the teacher, the professor is interested in what they're saying, they'll learn from each other, they'll learn from me, I'll learn from them. And then they begin to open up and blossom. I've seen it happen so many times with literally thousands of students over the years. And to be able to do that and watch a student's face light up. Or I've received emails of students who say, because of this course, you've opened up doors for me, I've changed my career path. That may not happen very often, but it's to stimulate them, to motivate them, to inspire them, whether it's a healthcare organization I support or whether it's a student I work with. That's so important to me anyway. Lets me sleep at night. Certainly the Alzheimer's Society was a wonderful time in my life, and I'm still involved with them today. When I was the president of social work, actually at that time, Leah, I took a 6-month leave of absence from the directorship of Alzheimer's to do something in my naive youth I thought would be easy to do, and that was to achieve recognition in law of social work in Ontario. Ontario is a major province in Canada. It's probably certainly the equivalent of California or New York in the States, but yet we were the only jurisdiction in North America, all of North America, 9 provinces, 50 states, with no recognition in law for social work standards, which shocks a lot of people, but it was the case. And so the 6 months turned into a 10-year campaign through 3 different governments, 7 different ministers, things reaching the peak and then crashing into the valley. It was like being in Hawaii on a surfboard. But I stuck it out, and I think lessons in life have to do with recognizing that things don't always work out, that you need to have perseverance. You have to follow through, to have a vision of what you'd like to achieve and to stick with that vision and to be flexible, because throughout any endeavor that anybody does listening to us today, things are going to change. And so we talked about physiologically, the body changing every second. Circumstances change, and we have to be ready to adapt. And that actually is the basis bringing us right back to stress. The idea that stress occurs, it's all about adapting to new circumstances and being able to pivot in that way. If you can do that personally and in your career, that's so important. And you need to have a mentor. Nobody gets anywhere on their own. You were very kind to me in pointing out several awards and accolades. I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for wonderful people who I could work with, who believed in me. And normally it takes only one person, maybe 1 or 2 people. And I've had a wonderful mentor, a mentor of mine from graduate school, and her name is Dr. Eva Phillip. She's a psychotherapist in Toronto, and she believed in me at a time that was a bit of a rocky time for me. And we stayed in touch ever since. And she's been wonderful, wonderful. And there have been some others as well, even back to high school or public school, that helped to get me on course that way. But recognize that, as John Donne said, no person is an island. And that is so, so true. And that goes for Einstein too. I mean, he built on people's, brilliant, brilliant man, of course, but he built on people's other ideas. And we always build up, and things always change. Nothing's ever etched in stone.
Aside from your mentors, what would you say that you attribute your success to?
I think it's to do with following my interests. I have many interests, and so I'm rushing off here and there sometimes. Right now, I'm working on a project with Leah Masten, who's my associate. We're looking at stress and its effect on the thyroid, actually. The thyroid gland, a much underestimated gland in terms of its importance that way. Again, that's around hormones. Also interested in heart health too as well, several other areas, and trying to link up how they work together. So, and of course we have brain health on top of that as well. So I think it's to do with following your interests, but recognizing the reality of life, that not everything is easy, having that perseverance, sticking to it. It's to do with attitude, it's to do with support that way. It's to do with recognizing that we don't have to be perfect. Nobody is. You know, anybody in any field only knows, to be totally honest with you, as you probably know, one tiny area of one field. And they may be experts in those areas. That's wonderful. But there's so much more to learn. and to keep that curiosity going. It's like childhood curiosity, perhaps, but indeed to believe in oneself. It's not easy to do that. We often don't. But to have that ultimate belief in your capacity, okay, to follow through and do what you'd like to achieve. Those are the kind of things I think are absolutely important as you write the next chapters of your life.
Speaking of next chapters, what's next for you within the next 5 years?
Well, I always love to learn because lifelong learning. We haven't talked a lot about that, maybe indirectly, but I love taking courses, and I thrive on that, and so I will continue to learn and do it on the computer, okay, at home if need be. I love doing public education too, as well, as I was saying, taking things that may be complex and making them understandable and relatable to people. That is so important to me. Writing as well. I wouldn't mind doing some writing, which I haven't done as much as I'd like to. And that's another thing. I enjoy traveling. Haven't been able to do it during COVID at all. I enjoy going to baseball games when I'm in the States and visiting stadia. That's a fun thing to do. Haven't been able to do a lot of that lately too as well. It's been a very stressful time for all of us with COVID, and everybody reacts in different ways. With COVID, for example, looking at health, it's affected our health in many ways. Psychologically, as we talked about at the beginning of our interview, economically, it's been devastating for so many people. And hopefully, we're turning that corner now with vaccination. But it's been so hard on many people, and their life dreams have been stalled or even shattered. And it's a tragedy in that way. But again, we're also capable of coming together, and I believe that ultimately the human spirit will overcome, and life will return, if not completely to normal. I think things like how we work and where we work, I think in terms of the way we entertain ourselves as well is so important. How we buy. I bought a lot more things online during this. Have you, Leah, bought more
Oh,
things?
yeah. It's not a good it's not a good habit necessarily.
Rip out my Visa card. But yeah, so certain things
Yeah.
will be incorporated into our society. Other things will fade away that we're not necessarily critical to carrying on. But again, if you're stressed, let me emphasize, it's normal. You're sharing feelings and emotions and frustrations with everybody else in some way. Anybody who tells you, I'm not stressed, I've been coping fine, they're not telling you the truth.
Well, Dan, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. You are so fascinating and inspiring. And I just thank you so much for your important contributions and important work that you do. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, Leah, thank you so much. And you are a wonderful interviewer.
Thank
I
you.
love appearing with you, and you ask wonderful questions. And good luck, and hopefully we'll meet again.
Same to you. And for more on Dr. Andreae, you can visit www.iaotp.com/Daniel Andreae.